Have you been curious about tea? Have you been wondering what tea to drink and discover more tea beyond your average tea bag? You might be thinking, what is the best tea for me to try? What's good for my health? What can calm me down? Well, actually, it doesn't matter what tea you try. Tea has great benefits and it has great ability to help you calm yourself down. Depends on your time, your moment, the temperament. But honestly, there's some great health benefits, including antioxidants and flavonoids, and a lot more. Actually, more health benefits than some fruit and vegetables, even. I'll let you to do the research. But today, I'm here in the beautiful heart of the West End in London at Jing's flagship tea shop. Jing Tea specializes in single garden tea. They work with various different locations around the world, including China, Taiwan, Sri Lanka, and more. They work with tea growers to drive sustainable tea for the future, bringing distinct flavors and a real tea experience to those that want to try tea at home from beautiful places from around the world. I personally have had a great experience with Jing, and I want to share more today. We have a special specialist from Jing, Will Ritson. Will comes from a great background of knowledge of tea. He started in a Chinese medical and tea shop several years back and found a great passion for tea. Thereafter, he joined Jing, and he's been at Jing for 4 years, and he's been specializing in the tea experience, really bridging the gap between those that cultivate and grow tea at origin and bridge the gap to those that are at home wanting to try and experience tea in the comfort of their own home. So with that being said, hi, Will.
Hi,
Thank you for having me here today.
It's a pleasure to have you. And I'm excited to talk about tea.
So the store, we're here in St. Christopher's Place in the heart of the West End.
Right in central London, yeah.
Beautiful shop. I used to work at Selfridges when I was a wee young girl.
Yeah, that's just right around the corner.
Yeah, and I actually came past Jing, this shop, about 6-7 months ago. I knew about the brand, but I didn't know there was a store, and it's really cute, quaint, and just the feeling in here is just a great vibe.
Yeah. So we opened up the shop about 2 years ago with the interest of really trying to give people the best tea experience possible. So, there are a few tea shops in London, and obviously London has a big culture of tea. But we felt there was a bit missing. And obviously that's what we do, which is single garden, single origin tea. We thought we'd open a space where, we have our tea bar. You can come in, you can taste, you can ask questions, and you can have a good time and enjoy some tea. So that's why we're here.
And that's exactly what I felt when I came in the store that day. I was like, oh my goodness, like every type of tea, I'm really into my tea, and I'm really happy to be here because when we first met, actually, well, to be in person, I'm happy to be in person. But when we first met, I realized how passionate you are about tea.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I could learn a lot more from you. And I have, I sort of gravitate to those that know more about tea than me. So let's get started in terms of what inspired you about, tea and to work with tea. I mean, did it just come to you in a moment of inspiration? Because, when you're a little boy, it's not something you go, oh, tea, I'm going to work with tea. I guess it's something that has come along with you on your journey.
Definitely a journey, yeah. And then a kind of tangent, a big tangent from what I was doing. But essentially the main driver was I gave up drinking alcohol just as a lifestyle choice, as many people do. You get to your mid-20s and you've kind of had all your fun.
Yeah.
And I thought, I just want to be a bit healthier. And it gets a bit boring. You don't go out on Friday nights as much. And I wanted to look for something that had the same sort of engagement and community and was interesting enough to explore. And a friend of mine gave me some yellow tea, which is a really rare kind of tea. And I tried it. It's a loose leaf tea, and I tried it and followed the instructions, and it blew my mind. And I was like, whoa, this is incredible stuff. So I just went down the rabbit hole. I found out, who was making it, where it had come from, and then obviously the shop that were selling it. And I went into the shop and I loved that place so much. I ended up working there.
I love
and
it.
I learned everything about tea from a wonderful group of people at Mayleaf in Camden. So Don and Celine May.
I know Mayleaf in Camden.
Yes, it's a really wonderful shop.
Yeah.
Really like high level of kind of tea expertise they have
Yeah.
there. And I'm lucky enough to get to know them and to kind of have that knowledge imparted on myself. So I was there for a while, and then Jing approached me because they were opening a shop, and I thought, why not, venture out into somewhere else and kind of help expand the tea culture in London. So I helped Jing open the shop here, and now we're here now talking. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it's a very lucky journey.
Yeah, and I have to say, I did my first sort of tea Gaiwan ceremony with my friend George. So shout out George. And actually, I came across, the experience of like really like feeling the vibes of having tea. I was in nature. We did like because I fast a lot. So I was just done some meditation. I met him and we did the experience, and he was talking me through it. And he mentioned Mayleaf as well to me because he's a big fan of Mayleaf, and he was telling me, oh, you've got to go down there and spend some time. But because I found you guys and I met the team here in store, and shout out to Steph.
Yeah.
Also another Stephanie. We hit it off my first visit in, and I was just telling her about the podcast. And to be real, actually, I think I came in and I was looking for was it a Gamaisha and it was another tea. A roasted rice tea as well. Mm-hmm. There was a couple of brands that I was looking for, and I'd previously shopped at T2, and if anyone knows about T2, find it really mainstream.
Yeah.
And that for me isn't what tea's about. Like if I want to buy that kind of tea, I'll go to a supermarket, and I don't buy tea from a supermarket because I feel that there's so much more to it. I want to experience it. Actually, when I was in Selfridges as a kid, there was a tea bar back in like 2001, I think it was. Yeah. And they made me sit on this tea bar. There's a special tea bar they had as a pop-up, and I'd make tea all day. And I think that is what got me in. Yeah. And I was going to the loo all the time, but it was amazing. Like they had this great, like I was there, just customers coming into the food hall, and customers that had time and wanted to chat, and that was perfect. And I was just making tea. I wasn't using a Gaiwan. So I had ran a little tea bar myself. Yeah. I totally forgot when we spoke. But yeah, so sometimes I think I've lived many lives like a cat. But you know what you said about like giving up alcohol?
Yes.
I really resonate with this because, and also for the listeners and the viewers, like I talk about, the fact that in other episodes that we don't necessarily need to have things like tobacco or alcohol or drugs or these kind of things to make ourselves feel better. Actually, those are distractions. They numb us. They pull us away from our reality and our present moment. But when I did drink, and I wasn't a big drinker, do you know what I'd do the next morning?
What?
I drink rose hip or rosebud tea.
Oh, nice.
Because it cleanses your organs, like it cleanses the liver and the kidneys. Yeah. So I'd be like, everybody, I've got the hangover cure.
That yang energy. Definitely.
Yeah. So, but now I don't drink alcohol either, and I totally am on the same sort of.
Yeah, for me, it's a cultural thing as well. So, like you say, there are many kind of forces of distraction. Alcohol is a really easy one for everyone to get into because of that culture. But, you're risking your health to a certain extent. Obviously, I'm sure there are many people who are just drinking it safely and it's totally fine, but you can risk your health, your mental health. And also like it hits your wallet hard, you're out like, and you're like, oh, it's fine. I'll get this round. And I realized how much money I was saving as well. And, I'd rather spend some money on a really, really nice tea and kind of enjoy it for a lot longer and kind of, stay in my right mind and have the benefit from that. They kind of like throw it away, I guess. But also the cultural aspect of tea, the community around it, it's just really like without saying maybe corny, it's very wholesome. There's a lot more like present people, you know, it's kind of got this element of like you get together, you talk about things, you talk about your feelings, maybe you kind of like have some really intimate chats with people. Even, you know, if you're making tea in a tea bag, like the whole idea of like putting the kettle on, chucking a tea bag in, phoning up mum and having a heart to heart, like that's what tea is about, right? You can't separate that from the culture wherever you go in the world. You know, you go to India and someone will give you a chai when you come in the door. You go to Mongolia and they'll give you a yak butter tea made with pu'er. And it's like this element of welcoming people and supporting people and kind of conversation is all part of the culture of tea, which just made me love it even more.
That's really beautiful. And it's true what you say about, you know, actually for us being British and being born here, shall I put on the kettle?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want a cuppa?
Yeah.
Shall we talk about it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's literally in every soap, every film, every household, like everyone knows it. When I was growing up, you know, it was typically like tea with milk. My dad would make a bit like the masala tea.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I remember my dad getting this pot and just stirring, and I was like, what is he doing? And that was his, but, you know, I didn't really respect it at the time. He was like, no, this is what we do. We used to do this back in Africa, and in Goa they do it, like the cardamom and, you know, and then stirring the tea. There used to be a tea, the sweet tea with the carnation milk or the condensed milk, which is quite sweet. I know they have that in parts of Africa as well. Like friends I grew up with, neighbors, even West Indian neighbors, they would, and when that tea happened, you'd get excited because it was sweeter as a kid. Sweet, very sweet, probably not very healthy. And then I think back in like 2013 or 14, I got really sort of sick with a really bad cold. And, you know, touch wood, I don't really get sick anymore. And I think that's holistically because of the way I live my life and healthy sort of choices. But I was like, you know, I was getting a bit of like, you know, you get a bit of phlegm and mucus. And someone said to me at work, cut out the milk. Now, at this point, this is actually was the transitional point of like taking out cow's milk and things like that. But I actually just cut milk because I'm vegan now, right? But I took out the milk and I was like, right, okay, so then, I'll have my lemon and ginger because I need to, you know, and that's when the green tea, I kind of came back to green tea a bit more. And I just started drinking herbal teas, green teas, white tea, one of my favorites. And that was the point, you know, where I actually dropped the typical British tea with milk. I've never had one since. Yeah,
it's kind of a like you say, a transitional point when you can get people away from the norm, which is black tea with milk, which is perfectly fine and like, you know, totally enjoyable. I'm going to have an Assam breakfast tea when I wake up sometimes.
Oh, that sounds nice. Though.
Yeah, exactly. You know, if it's got that flavor to it, it's kind of what you're looking for, that comfort feeling, then yeah, perfect. It has its place. But once you remove the idea of like having a tea with milk, people are like, oh, what would that taste like? And you say, well, actually, you know, this is where you can begin to explore the different tea types because you have a green tea or a white tea, which you wouldn't pair with milk because obviously it just wouldn't taste that great. Yeah. And you explore them for their own flavor. And then you start to investigate, well, why does it taste that way? And that's where we go on a big journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And that whole feeling of taste and feeling, when I've had sort of tea moments with my friend George again, hey George, he would encourage me. We would sit still. We'd have music playing low key in the background, and I remember we made a decision to like not talk. So we just had a silent moment, and we did it for quite a while. And then afterwards we talked about how we felt and what we felt from the tea, the taste, the feeling, the vibe. You know, and I loved that. And that was a Friday night.
Nice.
And after that, then I was hungry and we got vegan inspired food from Forever Vegan Kitchen, one of my favorites. But yeah, so that for me was the Friday night. So coming back to, you know, like just investing your time, your energy, your hard-earned money, and like to something like tea where you get all these great benefits and a great feeling, I think is a great transition.
Yeah. Or, you know, if you're not committing to, giving up alcohol and you just wanted to explore something that had the same level of depth and probably even more, if you're talking about like history and like how to make it and how to enjoy it, tea can be a great partner for that. I mean, we've even worked with people to develop like tea cocktails. You use tea in different food recipes. So there's multiple applications that you can explore.
For the listeners, and I'm going to go by the premise that we've got people that are really like tea, enthusiasts to just brand new to tea. What would you kind of, to break it down, the different tea types, we've got black tea, green tea, white tea. You mentioned yellow tea earlier. Yeah. How would you kind of just do a quick walk through the different types of tea and what they represent and their flavors?
Yeah, so it's super simple when you think about it. All tea, if it's going to be called tea, comes from a particular plant, and that plant is called Camellia sinensis.
Yes.
So what you do is you harvest the buds or the leaves or sometimes even the stalks of this plant, and you process them to make a dried product, which is the final tea. So if you had a tea plant, technically you could make any type of tea because it's just how you process it that determines the type.
Wow, okay.
And the main process that we talk about is oxidation. So everyone can understand oxidation. If you were to take an apple and you were to bite into it, you leave it out on the counter, the flesh of the apple goes brown.
Yeah.
And that's because all of the chemical compounds, all the stuff inside the apple flesh is reacting with the oxygen. It's changing the flavor, it's changing the aroma, it's changing the texture of the apple as well. Same thing happens with tea leaves. So if we were going to put the tea types on a scale, there are 6 of them. And we start with the lowest oxidation, which is green tea. So green tea, they pick the leaves and then they heat them up, and applying heat stops them from oxidizing, stops them from reacting with oxygen. It keeps them green.
Wow.
And also begins to impart some interesting flavors. So we have green tea, and we have white tea.
My favorite.
Your favorite. Then we have yellow tea as well, very similar to green tea. And then we jump into the kind of middle of the spectrum, which is semi-oxidized tea. So tea that has a little bit more oxidation to it, but anywhere from about 15 to 40, 50%. And those would be oolong teas.
That's where oolong comes into the...
Oolong kind of sits as a spectrum in the middle.
Great. I'm learning. This is cool.
And then we have the 5th tea type, which everyone knows and loves, which is black tea.
Yeah.
Black tea is fully oxidized, which is why it's so dark.
Right. Makes sense.
Right? Because it's when it's picked fresh, it's green. They let it oxidize fully, and it goes dark. That's black tea. And then the final tea type, which is again not one that many people have heard of, is pu'er tea.
I've had pu'er.
You have pu'er, yes. So pu'er jumps around the spectrum a bit, so we kind of leave it on its own.
Yeah.
But to put them in order, you have green, white, yellow, oolong, black, and pu'er. So those are the 6 types of tea. So if you listen to that, you're now a tea expert.
I'm learning so much and I'm loving it.
Awesome.
I could hang out with you forever, but I hope your girlfriend doesn't get offended by that one. So cha-chi.
Yes.
I know chi means energy and cha in Chinese is tea, right?
Yes, so tea energy.
Wow. So I didn't even realize that was a term or a name. Could you share more for us to learn about cha-chi?
Yeah. So cha-chi is it's a hot topic in tea. When people learn about it, they're always very curious. Obviously, it comes from Chinese culture. So qi is very much related to Chinese traditional medicine and Buddhist philosophy as well. So the idea of qi being the life energy or the life force of a person. And that, in terms of tea, relates to perhaps the body sensations you feel after you drink tea, the way it reacts with the body, and essentially the energy that the tea can perhaps pass on to you or you can explore. It's particular in pu'er tea and aged teas as well. So a lot of pu'er drinkers on the kind of nerdy forums will debate what is cha-chi and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So if you really want to explore it, I would say look into pu'er tea and kind of go on that journey.
So is that connected to the most oxidated tea then? Because pu'er is kind of like a little bit at the top of the scale or off the scale almost.
Pu'er is in its own scale. So in a way, it kind of It is related to the processing, because pu'er tea is processed so that it can age. And we're not talking like, a few months, we're talking decades.
Wow.
So that's down to the way it's processed. But other teas tend to have different benefits based on how they're processed, but at the same time, they'll largely have very similar benefits too. So green tea will tend to have a lot more of the antioxidant, see if I can say this correctly, epigallocatechin gallate, or EGCG for short, which is a catechin, a kind of chemical that's naturally present in the tea leaf, which works as an antioxidant in the body, same way as flavonoids. So green tea has lots of those, and they convert into different chemical compounds in black tea because of how they're processed. But generally speaking, you really get many of the same benefits from many different types of tea.
So that's what I was going to ask you next is about benefits. And I know that, there's lots of, there's things that have been said that maybe have not scientifically been proven, but what can we say that we definitely know, or that you can share, that are of good benefits? Because I do think it is good for health and cleansing the digestive system, especially I love a rose tea or rose hip tea for that. Cleansing of the liver and kidneys also helps with kind of body pains and aches getting older. But, like overall, what could you kind of realize?
Traditionally speaking, a lot of those kind of herbal infusions, so things that aren't necessarily tea, people would look to those for, whether it's like turmeric for the joints or like you're saying, rose for the kidneys. But tea can also carry a lot of benefits in terms of what it can do for the body. Again, there's lots of information out there, some of which has got kind of scientific backing or research behind it, which is interesting. Some of which is maybe myth, maybe, you could take it as you will. But overall, tea is going to be healthy. The main thing to say is it's hydrating. It's mostly water. So obviously it's going to be very, very hydrating. And also it's going to give you a nice boost because there is a little bit of caffeine in there as well. But that caffeine is going to be balanced out with lots of other chemical compounds that are hopefully going to give you a calm and focused feeling, which I know you're a big fan of matcha. So you all have found that in matcha.
We're talking about matcha.
Yeah.
Yes, you got there.
That's because of a very specific chemical compound called L-theanine. So this all might sound very sciencey, but essentially these are all natural chemical compounds that just occur in the leaf. And you can do things to kind of enhance them being in the tea leaf as well. So in Japan, they would shade their tea leaves before they harvest them. Cutting off the light forces the tea plants to do a bit more work, and they kind of don't use up as much of this L-theanine, so it stays present in the leaf. Then when you process it, obviously it's there in the green tea, and that chemical compound is what gives you the balance of calm focus when you drink it with the caffeine as well. So it's got a long history of being used by Buddhist monks to help with meditation.
And matcha, I have a matcha a day. Keeps me sane, and that's my way, because I don't do coffee, and it's not my thing. I've never really liked coffee, but matcha, it's sort of, I've seen sort of statements saying it's like 20 times stronger than a natural kind of green tea because it's quite concentrate, right? So it's green tea powder. Exactly. For those that don't know it.
Exactly. Yes.
And it gives you like a good sort of kick, good focus, but it's higher caffeine levels, right?
It is. So because with normal tea, let's say we were to take even a tea bag and you were going to infuse that in a mug, what you're doing there is you're infusing, right? So we would call it an infusion because you're just extracting flavor and chemical compounds from the leaves, but you're not actually ingesting the leaf itself. You're just ingesting the kind of the water, the infusion. With matcha, because it's ground into a powder and then you mix that powder with water, you're technically making a concoction, right?
My favorite.
Exactly, yeah. And then you're drinking all of that. So you're ingesting the whole of the leaf and the powder. So it's a really large surface area. Obviously, you're not going to be using like loads of the powder, just a nice amount, making it taste good as well. And that's going to give you much more caffeine because you're ingesting that. That being said, the level of caffeine in a matcha is probably the same as an espresso. So we're not talking like mind-melting amounts of caffeine. Yeah. And again, you have it paired with this L-theanine and all the other chemical compounds. And most importantly, the taste, right? The taste is there. So it's a really enjoyable experience.
So I would, well, personally, I'd like to recommend that those that want to give up an espresso and want to swap that for a matcha, do it. I mean, I used to have matcha. I used to have this kind of ritual, like, oh, I've got a big meeting, or I've got to go and do something where I need to be focused and really be. I'd make sure I have a matcha before it.
Oh yeah.
But now it goes without saying, because I fast a lot. So I'll break fast with a fruit, and then later on I'll have a matcha, and it's my ritual. And I'm just like, oh yeah, I had my matcha. But a friend of mine always sort of says, oh, I'm having a bit of a day. It's been a bit like, ugh. She's like, oh, I can't wait to go get a matcha. She calls it matcha. I'm going to go get a matcha. And she's at home and she's like, Steph, I feel so much more at ease, because it does give you a really nice kind of feeling with it, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You can't kind of, yeah. So thank you for mentioning matcha. So I want to sort of debunk the myths around tea. And I think you've already sort of said a few things here, you know, that it can be dehydrating, or it can have too much caffeine, and maybe being classed as a bit similar to coffee, but I don't see them anywhere near each other. So debunk the myths for us, Will.
Yeah, there are two, maybe three big myths that we hear about tea. The first and most common is this idea of caffeine in tea, and the various teas having different caffeine. So yeah, I've heard black tea has all the caffeine, green tea has no caffeine, white tea has no caffeine, and all these kind of things. But we actually, chemically tested our teas for caffeine level. We took a range of 10 teas, all different tea types, so green teas, white teas, black teas, to see what was actually going on.
Yeah.
And we found that there was a range of caffeine levels, but it was throughout tea types and throughout the different teas. So 2 green teas had different caffeine levels, 2 white teas had different caffeine levels.
Wow.
But you had some white teas that were the same as green. You had some black teas that were lower than some greens and more than some whites. It was kind of all over the place within a range. So how we like to describe it is that tea has about 20 milligrams to 45 milligrams of caffeine.
Okay.
And that is about less than half a cup of coffee of the same volume.
I like that one.
So you're in that range. You're going to get a decent amount of caffeine if that's what you're after, but it's not going to give you the heart palpitations of an espresso. If you're getting really, if you're finding that's affecting you, switch to a cup of tea. If you're even then more unsure about caffeine, maybe try a herbal infusion or a caffeine-free tea. Those are still great.
Yeah.
Or a tea that's low in caffeine, like genmaicha or hojicha.
Genmaicha, my favorite.
Yeah, Japanese green tea, which is very, very low in caffeine. And still tastes wonderful.
And I love the flavor of roasted rice.
Yes, exactly.
Yum.
So genmaicha is a good one. Everyone loves that,
I love
especially as we get to autumn, super warming. And
rich. And your genmaicha here, I've got some.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I've got a nice big bag, and I tend to have it like at least sometimes, and then sometimes every day or every other day. Yes. It's like my afternoon thing later on after the matcha.
It's one of our most popular blends, just because the blend of green tea and rice together is quite unusual, but the combination is amazing. Super accessible flavor.
Yeah, and you have a really good blend here. I've tried genmaicha and other places, won't name them because I don't want to shame them. But not the same flavor. I was like having it the other day. I was like, not so good.
Yeah. So hopefully that clears up caffeine a little bit. So if your friends come to you and say, "Oh, white tea has no caffeine," you can say, "Well, actually, they all have a fairly similar level of caffeine." Then the second myth we can talk about is tea is dehydrating, or is it diuretic?
Yes.
Which means it makes you go to the toilet in very honest terms. This isn't true. It has never been true, and it's the same for coffee. There are scientific research tests way back into the 1910s.
Wow.
Caffeine on individuals and whether or not it acts as a diuretic or dehydrates people. What caffeine does is it can cause more blood to go to the kidneys, which might make you feel like you need to go to the toilet a lot. As if you drink a lot of caffeine, like a lot.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do that with a cup of tea. And if you're doing everything in moderation anyway, which is good for a kind of holistic, sustainable way of living, then you should be fine. So tea is perfectly hydrating, great way to get your water and to get some good taste.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. And we're debunking a lot of myths here because I want more tea friends.
Yes. Yeah. Get more tea friends.
Friday night, chilling out with some tea with a guy one. That's the vibe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the third one, and I suppose I'm hesitant to mention it because it's something that a lot of people are very self-conscious about. So don't be self-conscious about this. If you've had questions about it, definitely ask.
Yeah.
And that is, will tea make me lose weight? Because there's a lot of people that would say tea burns fat.
Yes.
And I would say there is research to kind of maybe suggest that this is possible, but there hasn't been enough research on a level to kind of understand why, how, and how much that works. So I would say don't pin your hopes on, the perfect beach bod by just drinking loads of tea. Also drink tea because you enjoy it and live your lifestyle because you enjoy it. Don't, put yourself into that box and maybe cause more harm than good eventually.
That's a really good one. And I just want to say that when it comes to weight loss from a personal perspective, I went through years ago wanting to lose weight and then focusing on, well, if I drink this tea or if I eat this type of food, but it's a holistic thing.
Totally.
And it's, it's yes, to do a lot with the food. It's not just one thing, but when you're quite desperate and you want to see results, you do go down those avenues. But I think those that have seen the results know that it's a holistic way of treating your body across what you eat, how you exercise, also your mind.
Totally.
If your mind's completely overthinking and confused and you're telling yourself you don't look good and you look unhealthy, then you're going to start to feel what you think, and it becomes an incestuous sort of cycle and not a nice one.
And this is what the podcast is all about, right? So if you're listening to this podcast, you're already in the right place.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. I was about to call you Phil. Feel good. Dr. Feel good
yeah.
Will.
I like that.
That was a bit of a blip. So coming back to Jing, because there's so many different teas, do you cover, and I think I've got the answer to this because I'm in the store now, so I'm kind of cheating, but what types of teas do you cover? Because I know you mentioned all the different teas in the oxidation process. And what are the relationships, and my sort of second part question is, what are the relationships with the tea growers? Because, when you're in the store, you sort of see flashes of content with some of the tea growers, and I see Sri Lanka and I see China. I'm like, I just want to be in that field or near those mountains. Yes. It's just beautiful.
Well, our whole purpose is to try and express the origin of the teas to people. A lot of the time that's through the stories of the farmers themselves, the people who actually grow and make this tea. Much like you would see in a good coffee shop, you would see pictures of the producers. It's the same with tea. There are people in China, in Sri Lanka, in Japan and Taiwan who are doing this really hard work, making, spending their lifetimes making this tea and becoming masters of their craft. And we want to celebrate that. So we do everything we can to put them front and center. So their names are on our packaging.
Yes.
If you buy tea, you can see who made it, where it was made, everything about the way it should taste, guidance on how to make it, like everything to make it as easy and accessible as possible for people to understand the relationship between themselves and the tea and the producer. So the full chain. And in that sense, single garden tea is really important to us because we're cutting out the middleman as well.
Yeah.
So we're not going through a European wholesaler. We're going direct to these gardens. We're meeting these people on the ground. Obviously, the past years, we haven't been able to do that. But in the 16 years that Jing has been a company, we've been every year visiting our farmers, meeting new people, making relationships stronger. And that's really, really important. I'd say it's fundamental to what we do.
Yeah, amazing. I'd love to be on the ground too. So if you need me to come with the film crew, I'll be there when we can travel. Well, my family originally comes from Goa, so if you can make relationships there as well, that would be even more fun.
Maybe you can help us.
Yeah, exactly.
And then in terms of the range of teas, if you come in to the shop, we're going to have everything here for you to taste. The only tea that you probably will find it hard to get is yellow tea, because that's quite rare. We try our best to source it every year, but every few years we'll get a really decent tasting batch of yellow tea, and that's a special one to look out for. Oh,
I need you guys to give me the update when it's next in store, because I'm trying that.
We'll see. Something that our head of tea, Mr. Tom Price, he does all our tea sourcing. He's always looking for a good bubble
Okay.
tea. So it's always on the list.
Well, when I come in and I see Steph and Stan or Matt in the store, I'll be like, don't forget, as soon as the yellow tea comes, just let me know.
Give me a call.
I'm here nearly every week anyway, walking by, and I stop in and I have a tea.
It's a great place just to come
I
and hang out,
love
isn't
it. Yeah, Steph, Stan, Matt, and we have a chat, and it's just the guys are so, they're not just here because they're working for Jing. Okay, yeah, they are, like literally, but there is a love and a passion for tea.
Yeah,
and they're really lovely people. So I come in and I have to make sure that my appointment's going to be, if I've got appointments, that I've got an hour, because I'll be here for an hour.
Yeah,
it's so much fun. Like, they're my friends now, I feel.
Yeah, I think that's the way it should be as well.
It's a community.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone that's in London or, visits London, definitely come down and check it out. But you can also buy it online on www.jing.com.
JingTea.com. Yeah.
Oh, JingTea.com. Okay, brilliant.
You could just Google Jing and we'll be there.
Yeah, and also on Instagram, we're sharing content, and you guys have some great sort of footage around, the tea growers and the different parts of the world that you work with.
If you want to know more about that, we're always doing deep dives on our journal. So on our website blog, you can read all the information about the stories of our producers, and obviously on social media we're posting up pictures of them all the time. They send us some great content, sunsets on the mountains of Taiwan. It's kind of hard.
I know that it was getting to me, some of the content. It was like, I need to be away, I need to be there. So shout out to Olivia Cox, because she's allowed us to make this happen, and she puts together some great content.
She does, yeah. Like this, actually, the picture you can see here. This is Emily Chen and her son.
Oh, wow.
Part of the Chen family from Ali Shan. They're up in the clouds, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely
my
incredible.
gosh, that is just magnificent.
Yeah.
That's the life.
That is the life.
Yeah. Need to get out of London. So finally, in terms of innovation or new sort of ideas that are coming out from Jing, what's happening right now that you can share? Yeah,
so the biggest project that Jing has worked on, I think it's been 5 or 6 years in the making, is our new Jasmine Pearl sparkling tea.
I've got a bottle here.
So this has been a long, long time in the making. It's a single garden sparkling tea. So that means it's using tea from a single garden, which is our Jasmine Pearls from Fujian province in China.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing about this is it's 4 ingredients. So it's literally bubbles, carbonation, bubbles, tea, some acid to regulate it, and water. That's it. Scottish water, bottled in the Highlands. So
Scottish water.
Yeah, you can't get any better than that. It's very, very simple, and it tastes delicious. So if you're looking for a alcohol-free kind of champagne moment thing, Jasmine Pearl sparkling tea is that thing.